Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Shaw and Mrs. Womack coming at you again from 2021.
Yeah!
We traveled through time.
Chapter 8.
Let's do it. Political parties. All right, so here are your objectives for this unit. This is just going to be for each of the sections, so we're not going to cover it. Number 1, identify the functions of political parties. All right, so the meaning of party. What you need to know is that a political party is a group of people seeking to control the government by gaining office in elections. You probably already knew that. But again, we actually have a much bigger party organization than just the federal level. So we have the electorate, like again, the people like us that are a part of a party, like we vote for a party. We have the organization itself, like literally you talk about like the Republican Party is like the actual organization of the Republican Party, like they determine what the party platform is and things like that. And then the people who are in a party in government itself. One thing you need to know is that in recent years, a lot of times people talk about party polarization and how the parties are becoming increasingly divided, and this is happening. But we'll actually look at a couple things later that it'll kind of look back at like the electorate and how that maybe not be true for them. But on issues though, the parties are definitely a lot more divided, and they treat it like things are black and white when it's not necessarily the case.
Not always. Okay, so tasks of parties. Each of the political parties are going to have a bunch of different things that they do. First, they're going to pick candidates. So any given election year or cycle, they're going to go through and pick which candidates they think would do the best job, and really more likely how likely they are to get elected.
Sure.
Yeah, electability. They're also going to run campaigns. So whichever candidate they choose in whichever capacity, they're going to support them through, helping to run campaigns and providing resources, etc. Give cues to voters. So, hey, voters, here's how the Republican Party stands on this particular issue, and then voters would kind of align their stance on that issue as well. Articulate policies. So when policies are either created or maybe passed or something turns into a law, they're going to articulate what that means and how they see it going into effect throughout the country. And then coordinate policy making as well. So they're going to work with the people within their own party to kind of coordinate what kind of policies or laws they want to create and get passed.
And you'll see that a lot, like with like Mitch McConnell in the Senate is a great example of being able to make sure that the legislation that is even really seeing the Senate floor really is in line with what he wants for the Republican Party in general. Absolutely. Same thing with Nancy Pelosi, although she has a lot less control over that, I would say, rather than Mitch McConnell would in the Senate. Okay, so a couple different things that we want to talk about like just how people actually like choose what politicians to vote for. So the first idea is the rational choice theory, and this is really important because basically the definition is that voters want to maximize the chance that policies they favor will be adopted by the government. So you might like a particular politician, you might like certain things about them, however, you might not vote for them because they might not have that electability, as Ms. Womack was mentioning earlier. So like a good example for the Democrats would be like Bernie Sanders. Like a lot of people liked him in the Democratic Party. Well, a lot of progressives liked him. And but again, he wasn't necessarily electable when you're talking about the whole electorate, like both liberal and conservative. He's going to have a really tough time appealing to a lot of conservatives. So when you talk about electability, Biden would be a better example of that, just because he is more of a moderate and could really pull moderate conservatives away from the Republican Party to vote Democrat, as definitely happened in the 2020 election. And again, parties want to win offices. So like if you are a great politician, you have great ideas, it really doesn't matter if you don't have the ability to get elected. So they're going to make choices that are going to be in like, how do we basically maximize our power in government at the federal, state, and then local level as well. Most voters are moderate, and so this is the really important thing. The thing that nobody really talks about is that something crazy like 70 or 80% of people are actually like within a certain range of the moderate category on the political spectrum. And so like most people, like, they're not super cut and dry. It's not like, some people are economically conservative, but they like social programs. So that's, you can't really put them into just one category. They are more of a moderate when it comes to the general political beliefs. But parties do seek voter loyalty, and again, they're going to, in order to get the most votes, then what they have to do is position themselves left or right of center to try to appeal to as many people as possible. Anything to add there?
I think that was great.
I do what I can. So this is what I was just talking about. Again, you can kind of see how the Democratic Party is going to really try to appeal to more people who are left of center, right of center for the Republicans. The independents, again, this is going to be kind of how independents kind of view themselves. Most independents view themselves as moderate, so they're going to vote accordingly. But again, they're more of a swing vote.
Okay, 8.2, determine the significance of party identification in America today.
I feel bad. I feel like you're
I'm
not in the
fine.
shot.
I'm fine.
You're not in the shot. There you go.
I'm good. Okay, so the parties in the electorate. Party identification is citizens' self-proclaimed preference for one party or the other. That's pretty self-explanatory, yes?
Yeah, but it's
it's
like a choice. I think it's different because in some
Sure.
places you actually have to if you identify with a party, you have to join the party and pay dues and apply and things like that.
Sure. This is more like I identify with a party and then I can vote really however I want. Though I don't actually have
Sure.
to join the party.
Sure, I declared it.
I declared. Okay, so citizens think they know what parties stand for, which we would consider something called the party image. Yes.
Maybe some people. I mean, I feel like it comes down to how informed you are.
Yes, so that was what I was going to get at. So some people think that they know what, they align themselves with one of the two major parties and they think, oh, well, I believe in all the things the party believes in. But when it comes down to it, it's really about being informed and making sure that you know what that party is voting on in Congress, what the party platform is. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think. But really, it's all about being informed because sometimes you might think one thing and really it's not actually true. Choose parties based on affinity with personal preferences. So again, we as Americans align ourselves with what our personal preferences are. So if I am someone who is pro-choice, I'm going to align myself with the Democratic Party probably, right? Now, is that always cut and dry, black and white? No, not necessarily. As Mr. Shaw said before, some people might lean conservative when it comes to economic issues and then maybe more liberal when it comes to social issues. So it's not necessarily black and white, one side or the other all the time. And then more Americans identify as independents. We already talked about that. Again, it's almost it's 20%-ish would consider themselves super to one side or the other. Most Americans would put themselves more in the middle. And so that kind of brings up the idea of ticket splitting. So sometimes if I, go in to vote, I really like a Republican candidate, so I might vote for them, but then I like a Democratic candidate maybe at the local level, and I would vote for them too. And so that's what we call ticket splitting. You're not necessarily voting all one party on the entire ballot. Maybe you're splitting up your votes depending on who you like or what policies you prefer, and then each of those candidates supporting it in different ways.
I would imagine too there's a lot more independence now because especially as the younger generations are kind of becoming more informed and becoming able to vote, people don't like either of the parties, and they kind of look at it as just a bunch of old people squabbling and not really getting anything, which it kind of is.
Yeah.
And they don't really also too if you talk about anybody really to anybody and you're like, oh, what party do you agree with, and they're like, ugh,
politics,
ugh. Or even the worst part is not wanting to talk to somebody because they're Republican or they're Democrat. Right. That kind of thing is becoming much more common, and unfortunately, it's just something that we have to deal with, and hopefully that we're going to be able to do better at talking about different beliefs and things like that, because that's the only way to really get things done.
Right.
So I think the 20% that we had both mentioned is more closely aligned to like the political ideology, like how important ideology is, like liberal versus conservative. In general, people identify with parties. Again, you can kind of see like going back all the way back to 1952, upwards of 2016. You see the rise in independence. And more people, and again, this actually kind of surprises me that Republican is so low.
Especially, I guess it would be interesting to see past 2016 how that would go up or maybe down. I'm not sure, but I agree. It's surprising to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it's a poll, it's an election study that they're taking. So, like, maybe we've seen a lot of trends have seen less Republicans respond to polls. So maybe that's the trend we're seeing there too.
True.
But I'm not really sure about that. That's interesting. But again, you do see the rise of the independent vote there too. You'll see here again. We've talked about how young people are more often Democrat. They tend to lean Democrat or liberal, and then as you get older, that life cycle effect, you tend to become more conservative or vote Republican. But there's also a big trend towards young people becoming independent, as I mentioned, and you see that 68% here, 18 to 24. Again, this is from 2014. Obviously, it's a little dated, but I imagine that probably has only increased.
Yeah.
Well, maybe since 2014, maybe more Democrat, but I'm not really sure. We'd have to see.
I feel like young people are tending to be more progressive.
Yeah,
it would be hard to.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of green, environment issues,
like not
and
even
like
Democrats,
that.
like.
Yeah, almost like green.
Almost,
yeah, like Green Party, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Progressive.
Well, and that's part of the reason why you see the Democrats adopting such things like environmental regulations, because they know that a lot of young people are going to be in favor of that. Anyway.
Very true.
Okay, 8.3, the party organizations, and we're going to describe the structure of political parties at the national, state, and local level.
Okay.
I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Sure. So local parties, once they were like the main party organization, so it hasn't always been at the federal level these huge, like kind of overbearing political parties. At one point in American history, it was more important to focus on local, right? Like local grassroots, small government. And by small, I mean like the city of St. Peter's.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
So anyway, we eventually get to the point where we have like these party machines where, the type of political party that relies heavily on material inducements.
Yeah, like favors.
Okay. Such as patronage to win votes to govern. It rewarded voters, and then this happens in New York and Chicago. This is really getting into a lot of American history.
I can help you out
which
there.
is where you're more geared towards.
I can do that. So again, what's interesting is about what Ms. Womack said is that local politics have really kind of fallen off the radar a lot. However, local politics are actually still probably more important to participate in, because that actually affects your life much more on a daily basis. Whereas, think about like the president. The president probably barely.
Yeah, I mean, we put
so
much emphasis on who the president's going to be and who's going to win the election, but how much does the president actually impact you on a daily basis?
Right. Whereas
not that much.
Whereas the mayor of your city or the alderman of your city are going to have a much bigger impact on your daily life. Like you think of like your commute, like your water taxes, just taxes in general at the local level. Like all of that's going to matter more. Anyway, the party machines got really powerful because they would exchange favors for votes. So basically, they would give people, like if an immigrant just came to the city and they needed a place to stay or a job, they'd be like, "Hey, here's your job. Here's your place to stay. But hey, we need to vote for you to vote Democrat." And they probably actually did that. I would imagine. Yeah. I mean the winking thing and the finger guns. Okay, but regardless, like that, it was super, super powerful, and they relied heavily on patronage that you see here. That again, these are rewards such as jobs, promotions, and contracts that were given for political reasons, meaning voting, rather than merit or competence. And we kind of talked about this a little bit with the bureaucracy and the civil service system, because this allowed a lot of people to get powerful government jobs without any qualifications for those jobs.
I believe this was reformed through the Pendleton Act in 1883.
Why, that's right, Ms. Womack.
Okay.
Again, and that was the progressive reforms that ended the system. And again, that kind of hurt party machines too, because they couldn't rely on patronage anymore to give people these jobs. But party machines in general like kind of faded out. I think the most recent one was Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it was active even like I think in the 80s, or something crazy like that. But anyway, like they were very powerful. But again, as the national politics kind of took over, local politics kind of took the back seat, unfortunately. And now people don't really care at all about local politics and nearly as much as they should anyway.
Okay.
So here you go. This is your wheelhouse.
Each of the states are going to have their own party system. So yes, there is a national Democratic Party and a national Republican Party, but each of the states are going to have their own way of kind of getting people on board with their ideology and trying to get voters, and then also coordinating candidates at the state level as well. So no two state party systems are going to be exactly alike. And remember, the Constitution doesn't really mention anything about political parties or even elections, so every state's going to be able to set up their own way of doing things. So some are well-funded, some are weak, and again, that kind of depends on the party and what state it's in.
Yeah.
Right? So
definitely.
I would say that Missouri has a generally weak organization when it comes to like the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party is so kind of heavily favored in Missouri. They're going to maybe have permanent headquarters, again, depending on the state. They're going to provide technical services. What do you think they mean by that? Technical services to the candidates?
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Like actually help them like to get organized to run and things like that, providing that funding.
So then the state party systems are also going to coordinate and help with primary elections. So remember, primary elections are kind of like pre-election elections. So it's a way for us to kind of narrow down the candidate field for each of the big political parties. And so, for example, in a general election year, like a presidential election year, we would go to the polls like in the spring, like in April, and we would pick who from each of the parties we prefer to be that leading candidate. These elections where voters select nominees for the general election. And there's a couple different types, open and closed. If it's an open primary, anybody who's registered to vote can participate. If it's a closed primary, some states require people in that state to actually register with a political party prior to being able to vote. So you would have to have already registered with either one of the political parties, or maybe as independent too.
Oh, maybe.
And then you would be able to vote that way. Missouri is it's open, but when you show up on a primary day, they ask you which ballot do you want.
Right.
And so it's not.
So you don't have to register, but you can only choose one. Like
one or the other.
You can't vote in both.
Right. And so straight ticket voting, meaning a lot of people, when they go to the polls and they vote, they're just going to either vote all Republican or all Democrat. They don't even care. They might not even have researched all of the candidates on the ballot, but they know what they're going to vote for, and they're going to align themselves with the party rather than individual candidates. Single column or random list of candidates.
I think that has to do with like the way the ballot is organized.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like so they could do a single column like where it's or I guess would the single column be more like a click check
this
X.
And it's all Democrat.
Yeah, that's what I would think that means.
Yeah.
And then the random list would still be there anyway.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, so I guess it again, and we can show you what an actual ballot looks like, or you can Google it. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And like you'll see, like some at the top of some ballots, they'll have just like Republican or Democrat, and you can just check one of the two, and then that ballot now when they count it will all go for all the Republicans on the ballot or all the Democrats on the ballot.
And again, this depends on the state. Not every state has the same system. Some states you do it electronically. Some states it is on paper still. It's all, which, guys, we ran into some issues in the 2020 presidential election, and this is kind of part of the issue. Every state has a different system, so it's very difficult for the federal government to even have kind of a say on what's going on because all states are tasked with setting up their own situation. So.
Yeah, and that's, I was going to say, too, the only thing that's really a tough, you want the states to have that power, like because they have the power in the Constitution to control the elections.
Right.
However, if you were able to just complete mainstream it, or just make it uniform,
right?
Like that would really make it a lot easier. You wouldn't have nearly as many people complaining about perhaps like fraud or and that's the thing too. Like even now we're already seeing state governments that are trying to change their election laws because of what happened in 2020. Some of them trying to be more open, some of them trying to be more restrictive, and we'll talk about that more when we get to like elections next in the next week or next week's chapter. Okay, so the National Party organization is going to be, again, really one big thing is their organization of the National Convention. So the National Convention is, they meet every 4 years, and at that convention, they write the party platform. Okay, they also talk about the formal nomination of candidates, mainly the president. But again, the party platform is much more important because you talk about, or I guess it gets to like, what do people believe? Like, what are our values going to be? And so that like this is the National Convention is like communicating that to all potential voters and trying to attract more independent voters or maybe solidify their bases.
And that's a good point. And we say they meet every 4 years to kind of do this, and yeah, I mean things are changing every 4 years, and they're going to change their platform to kind of gear the party towards what's going to attract more voters. So if, a policy becomes much more popular in a 4-year time period, then, they're either going to drop that or kind of move towards it, whatever it might be. But they do have to make adjustments that, rapidly so that they keep, the largest amount of electorate as they can.
And I feel like that's hard too, just because it's like I feel like the Republicans right now are in general are having a big problem with this because they're trying to attract more people, but like they're not really wanting to change very much about their party platform. So like it's hard to just to attract more people without making changes. And the Democrats right now I feel like are doing a little bit better job. Although again the national parties in general, like they're just really slow to change. And that's just going to lead to issues like in the 2016 election, like the Democrats really didn't do a good job of appealing to workers, and then that's why a lot of working votes went to President Trump. And so, I mean, it's like it has real consequences.
Yes.
The other thing is the National Committee. So this is what the actual, like, when we think of like the Democratic Party, that's really like the committee itself is going to be organizing the Democratic Party on a national level. So they're going to keep the party operating between conventions. So between those 4 years, they're going to raise a ton of money. They're going to promote party unity as well. Again, really emphasizing on whoever that nomination is, or whoever the nominee is, or the party platform that was written at the convention. There's a national party chairperson as well that is going to attend to the daily operations of the party, which sounds like a lot for one person.
Oh,
like
yes.
I would not want that job at all.
Yeah.
And again, that's a lot of power, and you are going to really be talking like the Democratic National Party chairperson is probably going to have like a direct line to Biden.
Yes.
And same with the Republican Party with President Trump
and all that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that like they are basically trying to make sure that whatever happens in government, that it is in the best interest of the party going forward. And we're seeing that right now, even with the passing of the third stimulus bill. The Democrats are really trying to get a big win for Biden, and that's why they're not really wanting to work on things with Republicans. They're not wanting to to negotiate very well. And it's kind of making Biden look a little bit bad because he promised that. He said that we would be bipartisan, together. And then all of a sudden, the very first bill that he's trying to get passed and will pass, like it's looking like it's not going to have like really any Republican support, or very 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 little.
But it's interesting because the polls are showing that the majority of American people support the bill.
Yeah.
And it's almost showing like Congress itself is more partisan than the American people are, which is a whole nother issue.
Well, and that's true. And I feel like Republicans in general, like because they don't believe in big government spending,
Mm-hmm.
like they're in this really tough situation right now because they want to help. I'm sure they want to help. They're not horrible people. Like they want to do more, but like they are also like against big spending, So like what, like they probably have this really hard, these hard choices that they have to make. And I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it works out, honestly, over the next couple of years, especially in the 2022 elections, the midterms, and see how the choices that everybody is making is going to affect those people in 2022.
Because it will.
It
All
will.
right,
It always does.
8.4. Evaluate how well political parties do in carrying out their promises. Ooh.
Foreshadowing.
Okay, the party in government, promises, and policies. So we know that the party that is in power determines policy. Now, this gets a little bit tricky if we have vocabulary term, a divided government. So let's say, the president is Republican, like when President Trump in his last couple years, he was a Republican president. The House of Representatives was dominated by Democrats. The Senate was dominated by Republicans. It was very difficult to come to any kind of compromise and agreement, and so very little gets done in that regard. Right now, in the time period that we are sitting right here in these chairs, we have a unified government. We have all Democratic-led in all areas. So by one vote. By one vote. The Democrats are determining policies right now at this moment. Okay. But that changes rapidly every 2 years. Usually it's going to change in some kind of way. So next bullet then, coalition is a group of individuals with a common interest that support political parties. So this can be very broad. Coalition of citizens, coalition of members within the government.
Yeah, I would say it's probably referring to just the government here. And this is more popular in like the British Parliament, for example, where there's so many different parties. You have to form coalitions to try to create a majority. For example, let's say that going back to what you said under President Trump in his last 2 years, the Senate had the Republican senators had a majority, but if, say, there were 6 more moderate senators, and then they could end up the Democrats could end up trying to sway those 6 votes in order to get a coalition that would make up a majority.
Right.
This doesn't happen very often.
No.
Again, it happens much more in European countries because they don't have the two-party system, but because of the two-party system, and most people are like, hey, you better get in line. The whips and everybody are making sure that people are voting accordingly, because there's real consequences to not voting with your party. You could lose funding, you could lose support. Again, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So most presidents fail to implement their campaign promises. This is very true. Presidents, and we've done it, there's been a graph on this, maybe on an FRQ.
Maybe.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Presidents become less popular, essentially, as the longer they're in office, and that's because they run their campaign on all of these big things. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. We were just talking about how Biden was going to bring the parties together to get all these policies implemented, and really that has not happened yet. And so most presidents generally overall fail on most of their campaign promises, not all of them, but in general, they can't live up to everything that they're promising the people in a 4-year time span. But they do live up to many of them. So again, going back to the Biden, he promised COVID relief. He promised another round of stimulus. And as far as it's looking at this moment in time, that is going to happen. So it's hard. It's like a fine balance of really doing what you feel is right, but also having to work with the realities of how government functions. And so it's very difficult sometimes. And the party platforms are really a blueprint for the president, and what policies he would like to see implemented or passed, and how they're going to go into effect across the country. So again, we use that party platform, that party comes together, they create, here's what we really want to work on, or here's what we're stand for, or here's where we stand on each issue, and then the president's going to kind of take that and jump off from that point.
I think too we put a lot of pressure on presidents when they really don't have an adequate amount of power to do everything that we could even talk about.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why you fail on a lot of promises, is because you say, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, because you want to get elected, but then you get the actual job and you realize, I can't do any of that. Yeah. And so that's really tough.
Roadblock.
Okay, so this I would spend a lot more time here on the party platform, specifically just going through the book. We've talked a lot about the difference between liberals and conservatives, and that is going to really take effect here too. You're going to see the same things we talked about: foreign policy, immigration.
These are actual excerpts from each of the party platforms from 2016.
Sorry, thank you. Yes. So again, party platform, it's the group of the list of beliefs and the list of things that each party wants to get accomplished. And you can kind of you don't need to get these down. I would not write all these down, but maybe just you kind of like I know in my class we did a little T-chart for the differences with liberals and conservatives. So I think that's the same thing that you might want to do here.
Yeah.
And I think you'll be good there. Again, healthcare, a huge one now. This becoming a lot more popular. Environment, same thing. And again, we've talked about these guys too.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the party eras, and honestly, I think we're just going to go through them pretty quickly because I really doubt that it's going to be that important. But the book does have it, so we want to at least acknowledge them. But I don't think that it's going to be a big role in the AP exam.
No.
So party eras are just historical periods in which a majority of voters cling to the party in power, which tends to win a majority of the elections. So like right now, we're really not in a party era because for the Democrats and Republicans have kept flip-flopping really for, gosh, I wonder what the last one was. Must have been
80s?
Democrats. 80s, yeah. I guess
Like
you could
with
say
Reagan?
80s with Reagan and Bush.
Yeah.
I was going to say 50s with like the Democrats.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the last one. So again, a critical election is going to be an electoral earthquake where new issues are going to emerge, new coalitions are going to replace old ones, and the majority party is often displaced by the minority party. Again, think like Great Depression, in the election of 1932. That was the critical election, and then the Republicans had been in power for, I think, at least like probably 12 years before that, and then the election of 1932 took place. The Democrats gained power, and they didn't give it back until like 1950. Eisenhower? Yeah, I think it was 50. Yeah. 52. 52. And again, party realignment is also probably one of the most interesting things that I think of in government and like U.S. history is when that's not. It says the displacement of the majority party by the minority party. I was thinking like when parties like actually switch. We'll talk about that too. Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of the things we're going to talk about, and let's just get right through it.
Okay, so 1796 to 1824. We have talked about this in class. Hopefully we talked about this in class. Maybe a little bit. I feel like maybe in regular Gov I talked more. But Madison and really many of the founding fathers actually warn against creating factions, creating political parties. They kind of say this will be bad if the country ends up going in this direction. We don't really listen to them. It happens anyway. So we know that Hamilton and Madison are part of the Federalist Party, and they are well educated. They're elite. They're going to be part of that capitalist Northeast.
Madison was Democratic Republican. He was with Jefferson. But Hamilton was Federalist.
We're talking about political parties.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
Sorry.
He's right. I was thinking Federalists and Anti-Federalists, which was a Federalist.
I was thinking of Hamilton the musical.
Yeah, I was not. Honestly, I've never even seen the whole thing.
What?
I know.
Oh, it's delightful.
I know. Alexander Hamilton.
Okay, continue.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
Anyway, so I don't know. The short-lived.
The Federalist Party was short-lived.
Yeah. Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans, they are going to be kind of opposing an opposition to the Federalist Party. They're more agrarian. They're focused more in the southern states. They're torn by factions.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's factions within their own party is what it's saying.
Yeah. Like we haven't really had the two-party system forever, and so like this is where the parties were just kind of like figuring themselves out, so they're pretty weak.
They're still trying to organize. They're still trying to figure out what direction to go in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next up is going to be the 1825 to 1856 is Jackson and the Democrats versus the Whigs. Again, General Andrew Jackson was really the leader. Again, he was probably the most popular Democrat, for a long time until FDR came around, which again, they would never have gotten along because they switched in 1930s. And then, so again, the Democratic Republicans are going to become the Democratic Party. It's a new coalition, or becomes a new coalition in the election of 1828. It's going to become Westerners, Southerners, and new immigrants, which I think is ironic. But we'll talk about that in a second. We don't need to talk about that later. Like the new immigrants, you would think that because the Democratic Party was a conservative group at this time, and the conservative, I guess conservative immigrants, I would just not have.
Well, I'm wondering if it's. Yeah, because some, yeah.
But it was more Protestants coming over still.
Yes.
So that might make sense.
Yes.
Okay. We're look at us trying to apply modern political norms to 1830s. Ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, this is they're going to broaden participation opportunities, making it easier to vote. You don't have to be a property owner and things like that to vote. So you're going to see a lot more in the electorate, which is going to change what the parties themselves have to do. Martin Van Buren is going to be the loyal opposition. He's going to be the Whig Party. Again,
doesn't last very long.
But I mean, he just didn't have a lot of power. Like the Democrats were so powerful, and then like Westerners, Southerners, and new immigrants. Like what else is there? New England? It's going to be tough to beat that.
All right, moving on. 1860 to 1928, the two Republican eras. So, in the 1850s, slavery is going to be like the driving force behind the kind of split into this two-party system. And so Lincoln is our first Republican president elected, and after Lincoln, we only will see either a Republican or a Democrat elected moving forward. Republicans are going to rise up as the anti-slavery party. Republicans are going to be more focused like in the northern, the northeastern states. Democrats are going to be more in the southern part of the country. And then we see a second party realignment in the last 60 years or so.
No, it lasted 60 years.
It lasted 60 years. Democrats controlled the South. So again, with Lincoln, we think Republicans more north, probably more elite. Democrats are going to be Southerners, agriculture.
I would have said elites were more Democrat.
Okay.
Because the Democrats were the conservative party usually back then anyway.
I'm thinking. Okay.
I would assume
probably
so.
True. I'm just wondering who's more educated at this point.
I don't know that you would even
put that as a category.
Well, I mean, because you're right that the elite would have been more educated, but I don't know that would have factored in as much yet.
Okay, and so then we get to 1896, and we have a second Republican era. I don't know what free silver even means. So.
Yeah, sorry.
U.S. history?
Yeah, it's like again the Democrats wanted the free coinage of silver to make money less valuable. So basically, you'd be able to pay if you took out a loan, you would be able to pay your money back with dollars that were less valuable. So you literally have more money. Like when you have loans, so you have a high interest rate like on loans, a high inflation rate. Like that means that you're paying your money back with less money than they took out. Yeah, that's what that free silver is about.
Weird.
Yeah, it's the worst part about U.S. history. Like kill me. I don't want to teach it.
7 minutes.
We got this. Okay, so 1930 to 1964 is the first big swap. Okay, you're going to see. Now the Republicans are going to be the conservative party. Democrats are now going to be the liberal party. So Hoover wants to do nothing about the Great Depression, essentially, and then FDR wants to do a bunch. And so
FDR's a Democrat.
Thank you. Sorry. So FDR promises a new deal. This is going to cause a new coalition to be formed since the Democrats are going to basically, they're not going to really help us get out of the Depression, but they're going to be like, hey, they're trying stuff. Great job. They're going to be elected for the next 20 years.
Sorry, and think about it like FDR takes over, he promises New Deal, we start seeing these New Deal policies being implemented, and so government is starting to get bigger, right? The task that the government is taking care of is starting to get a lot bigger. So think now, Democrats, big government, this is kind of where we start to see that emerging.
That's a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. Again, the New Deal coalition, urban dwellers, labor unions, Catholics and Jews, the poor, Southerners, and African Americans. Again, the African Americans are in particular the craziest change there because they always voted with the party of Lincoln because of obviously ending slavery. That change especially was really, really significant. Yeah.
Okay, 1968 to present. Southern realignment in the era of divided party government.
This is mine.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Is it mine? No, this is yours. I'm sorry. Go.
I don't care. So Nixon, when he takes over, so remember Nixon now is a Republican. He takes over after we have JFK, we have Johnson.
Ford. No.
Then we have Nixon.
Cart.
Ford is after.
Johnson, sorry.
Yeah, Johnson. So he comes up with what he calls the Southern strategy, and he's going to be very forceful on supporting states' rights, law and order, strong military, all of these really big Republican ideologies is what Nixon's going to hit really hard. The war on drugs, right? And so he's going to start winning over a lot more Southern conservatives. And we're going to see this kind of conservative movement emerging from Nixon's presidency on.
And that one was so the party switched in 1932. However, the South was still very solidly conservative, so then therefore solidly, they were Democrat. It's interesting because they were still Democrat, but they didn't. I guess they switched now. Here was the big switch. Because that's what was Nixon's goal, is he was trying to separate. He was trying to separate like evangelicals. He was trying to separate the wealthy elites and the things like that, and get them onto the Republican side because he felt that they were going to be able to do a better job representing them. Yeah, I guess.
So Republicans did not have Congress under Nixon, I guess.
I guess not. So that was so this is now the new pattern.
Okay.
So this is going to start the era of divided government.
Okay, so now we start to see a lot more now a divided government where the president's going to be one party and maybe one or both houses of Congress are going to be the opposite party. And now that's, again, kind of the new normal. Even when we have a unified government, usually in a midterm election, one of those houses of Congress is going to flip. And so that brings us to party de-alignment. It's the gradual disengagement of people from the parties, making the government less effective. And that's what we're kind of seeing now, I think. People are becoming kind of fed up with the whole situation. They're kind of taking a step back. And because of, less participation in general, the government's going to become less effective. Although, I don't know, when an election year comes up again, people seem to care.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in general it leads to a lot more apathy, and people not participating is going to lead to issues in government because the government's not actually going to be providing for what the people need because they don't know.
The government is not representative of the people. There's there's always a large group of people who are always going to vote, and they're always going to get represented because they're voting. And then
well, it's like with young people don't vote,
absolutely.
So the government doesn't pass any policies for you.
Right.
Okay. Party coalitions today, again, we kind of saw this when we did the building a demographic profile activity. This shouldn't surprise you. The realignment of the South, again, what we were just talking about, happening in the 60s. You see the big switch taking over. That was Nixon's Southern strategy. And I think this is the last one. Mm-hmm. So third parties and analyzing their impact. Again, there's going to be three types of third parties: cause parties, offshoots of major parties, and then vehicles for individual candidacies. They rarely win, but they do affect elections, mostly because they pull votes away from the major parties.
Okay, so let me give you an example.
Do it.
We're in the early 1900s. Teddy Roosevelt has been president. Everybody loves him. He decides not to run again for a third term. He chooses Taft as the person who would succeed him. Mm-hmm. And Taft wins. Taft is terrible. He gets stuck in a bathtub. I'm going to keep going. Anyway, Teddy Roosevelt creates this third party, the Bull Moose Party. He runs. He was a Republican. He runs as that third party, Bull Moose Party. We also see Woodrow Wilson running as the Democrat. All Teddy Roosevelt does is pull Republican votes away from Taft, and Woodrow Wilson ends up winning the election. Same thing happens at Bill Clinton, 1992.
Ross
Perot.
Bob Dole. Real quick, that's the biggest thing that they impact, but they also bring a lot of awareness to certain not as well known ideas, and they can make people more aware of those. Why only two parties? There's not actually a good reason. It just kind of got decided at some point that's how it was going to happen. Nothing in the Constitution about it. But now all states have determined, they actually have laws, and then because they get to choose how elections are run, they have laws that state that they are going to divide their votes up accordingly. So that's it. Legislative seats are awarded only to the candidates who come in first in their constituencies. That is the it's not the parliamentary model is different, and they do it based on like the percentage of votes that they win. Anyway, we can talk about that later.
Proportional.
Hey, whoa, look
Oh
at
my
that.
gosh, look at that. We already knew it.
So this is what I was talking about. The European model of democracy is proportional representation, and they say that it's an electoral system that awards legislative seats to political parties in proportion to the number of votes they won in an election.
It sounds kind of lovely.
Well, it's a much in a way it's a lot fairer because like third parties would actually have a much bigger chance and they would be able to represent people more specifically. Also, we talked about the problem that like Democrats don't really represent all of the people that are in their party very well. People are just like, yeah, I guess I'm Democrat because I think of this thing. They can point to one reason. Like that's not actually very representative of you. Like whereas in Europe they have specific labor parties. They have social parties.
Party.
Yeah, exactly. Green parties that are actually going to be able to win seats, and people can use their vote to really express what they want in government. And that was what we talked about with the coalition government. We're not going to talk about that because we already talked about it. Last thing, so sorry. Go ahead. We got to finish up.
Democracy and responsible party government. How should we govern? So each party wants to make sure they have a responsible party model. They create distinct governing programs. They have internal cohesion and commitment. So they want to make sure that the people within their party are loyal and they're going to continue to work towards the goal of the party in general. The majority party must implement a program and the majority party must accept responsibility. So we've already kind of been talking about this.
So if somebody doesn't follow through with their campaign promise, like it is the majority party, like it is their like that's what the responsible party model is, that they have to take the blame. Like
right.
They are going to implement their policies, but if it doesn't work, they have to take the blame for those policies.
And then Party Leadership Week in the United States. I don't know.
I would again. They're really now these giant things are just they're moving forward. It's like we've created machines that we can't stop.
And it's almost like they're not caring about the American people as much as they're caring about getting done.
Yeah.
Like whatever the party platform is, we're super focused on getting that 1 or 2, 3 big things done. And it isn't really what the American people really want.
And maintaining their power.
It's just saying we accomplished these things.
Right.
And maintaining power. It's a big one.
Again, this one, partisan divisions on a key roll call during the Obama presidency. Again, you can kind of see how divided people are. Again, it's you see a lot of zeros. And again, just in general, big numbers for, big numbers against. Again, you're going to see that a lot moving forward. Same thing here. Again, the political parties and the scope of government. Again, it's not as broad as it is in Europe. Healthcare, again, is a big example. We just don't, because of healthcare has really fallen by the wayside until Democrats have kind of picked it up. Just the parties not being disciplined and wanting to maintain their power really leads them to not want to create change. Mm-hmm. And again, it's hard to cut spending because people are not disciplined enough to say no. But if they say no, that is going to lead to their constituents being upset and potentially ending their political career. Hey guys, it's been awesome.
We did it.
I appreciate you. Take it easy.
48 minutes.
Take it easy.